kind of look back on the career, is it 30, 31 years? How many years?
32 and a half.
Long time.
Mm-hmm.
How has the business of solving homicides changed since you got into it? I know you did patrol for a little while before you got into CID.
Yeah, well, I was in patrol for 7 years, and then I went to homicide September 1st of '87, and then transferred from homicide unit to the murder squad unit September 1st of '88, and that's basically where I've been ever since. I think there was a lot more pounding the pavement back then, a lot more knocking on doors, a whole lot more of that going on. It still goes on today, but I don't think to the extent it did back then. I think there was a little difference back then, because a lot of the information you got was from witnesses and other people. You knock on doors and get information from canvassing. You didn't rely as heavily on a lot of the physical evidence that we're getting today, specifically DNA and that type of thing. When I first went to homicide, DNA was unknown. I think I made my first DNA case actually in 1991. When DNA, we matched, well, Michael Scott Magliola. I think you're familiar with him.
I interviewed him.
I know you did. And I believe he's the first DNA case that I was involved in. So that's how far back that goes. But prior to that, there was really not a whole lot of that going on. You might get some blood typing, that type of thing, but in terms of any DNA, that really was non-existent until late 80s, early 90s. But, you know, I think you did things differently back then. But at the end of the day, what we do today, really, it's going to come back to just hitting the bricks, just persistent investigation, just nonstop. That's how you make a lot of these cases.
DNA certainly been good to you. You've used it to great advantage. Did it play a role in the arrest that you made on, or I guess the indictment, the charge you came and talked about last Friday? I don't think it was fully explained how, other than that played a role in it.
Right, and we're not going to probably talk about any of that information that we got to this latest case, but certainly any case like that, you would always look at those types of possibilities, whether it's DNA or any other kind of trace evidence that you link back to a certain person or potential suspect, enter into a database maybe. You would do that. So theoretically speaking, that would be done in any case, not just a tanning bed case, but any case like that.
And I ask you this because I know you probably know, and I know it's a number, but I'm just curious. How many homicides have you had a hand in solving?
I really don't know the number to that. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of them. You know, I can't say we solved every single one of them. There's a few out there obviously we'd like to solve, Carl Williams being at the top of that list. You know, there's a lot of cases out there we'd like to solve, but I've been involved in a lot of homicides that luckily we were able to solve and get convictions on.
How much of that do you, I guess, sort of, even when you're off and away? You mentioned the Carl Williams case. I brought that one up because I know it's, you know, close to you. We've talked about it over the years. How much does that stay with you even when you're away from here? You're thinking about it and you're walking away, and like you say, that's one you'd like to have been able to clear. Right.
You know, as I've told others today, it's difficult to find a good time to walk away when you work homicides. Because there's always another case, there's always another victim, there's always another door to knock on. So you never find, well, after I finish this case, I'll go ahead and leave, because that never happens, because when you finish this case, here comes another case. So, you know, when you walk away, there's no way to avoid having regrets that you wish you solved this case, or you wish maybe you could have solved that case. I think in time, all the cases will be solved. I'm hopeful that the Carl Williams is one of those cases. I'm hopeful that case will get solved to give the family some closure.
Do you look back upon any of these cases, and I know you're proud to have cleared them all, but some of these are I mean, you know, I think about the Trimble case. I mean, that was, you know, legendary case in Nashville. Everybody wanted to solve that one. What's on your short list? Like, these are, you know, I'm proudest that we were able to solve these, because I'm sure they were hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases on that list. You know, I look at them, whether it's I had a homicide. Donna Baycott was killed in 1990, and Michael Scott Magliola killed her, and that didn't make a whole lot of news. But I worked on that case a long time, and we finally were able to make a fingerprint and a DNA connection on that case. So that case really stayed with me for a real long time, even though it didn't make any news or anything like that. But of course, Marcia Tremble, Janet March, you know, those cases, you can't help but stay with you. And they never leave you. You know, you always take a piece of them away with you, whether it's the families, how good the families treat you, and how much you try to help the families and try to bring the families some closure, because you become emotionally attached to these families, as I have over the years. I can't help but become emotionally attached. It's just the way I am. and you try to do what you can do to resolve the case for them, because you realize how much anguish that they're in. You can only imagine the type of anguish that Virginia Trimble was in for all those years. I don't know how she did it. I'm not sure I could do it, but she did it. And the Levines, Janet's parents, how they were able to endure as many years as they have until they finally got the closure they were looking for. And all the other victims' families that are out there that look for the same thing, just they want to know who killed their loved one. And what we do is we make that phone call to tell them who killed their loved one. And that's what brings us satisfaction, I think, being able to bring the families that sort of justice and closure.
I know a lot of the victims' families, because I've gotten to know them over the years, not in quite the same way you have, but many of them have told me that they appreciate, the way you kind of always made them feel like their case was important, and they know because they watch the news,
right,
that you and your people have other cases. But when they came to you, they said you always were on top of their case. How do you manage that to make them all feel like they're important? Because I know you're busy.
Right. Well, because you have to take each case, and it is important for that family, obviously. So you have to be able to be in a position to know what the case is about, to understand the case, to work on the case, to have information, so the family can call you at any given time. And I take phone calls literally every day from families, and I make the time. I think you make the time. That's how you do it. You don't. Yes, you're busy, but you make the time to meet with the families, and that's what I've done. And I've done my best. I mean, I haven't done it 100% of the time, but I've certainly tried to do it every time, to meet with the family and have some sort of interaction or some sort of exchange of information, and hopefully convince them that when the case becomes solvable, we will definitely solve it, take any information they have, communicate with them as often as they want to communicate. I communicate with many of them via email. Some write me letters, some call me.
I know the older generation doesn't embrace the stuff, and they still,
right,
get a piece of snail mail now and again,
right,
to remind you of how it was. Do you leave with any regrets? And I know it's hard to operate with regrets. I don't run around with a bunch of them in my pocket.
Right.
But is there something, I wish I'd have done this, I wish I could have accomplished that, I wish I hadn't have done this?
I don't know. I think maybe just wishing you could, every single case that came across your desk you wish you could solve, obviously, and I think that would be the regret most homicide detectives would have, that they could solve every single case that comes across their desk. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. There are going to be a few cases out there for different reasons that you're just simply not going to be able to solve. But I think, to me personally, that's my regret, is that I'm not able to solve every case that I came into contact with.
Now, there's something, and I don't ask this to get you to talk about yourself, but I know you could have probably achieved greater rank. You wound up spending the vast majority of your career in an area that it was clear you had extreme competence in. And Bill and I talked about this. I remember when you came sergeant, there was some thought, is he going to be able to stay there? And it's funny how it works, but are you glad you did what you did, as opposed to, you could have been a major, could have been a chief, who knows, what you might have been able to do. But you stayed in an area where you felt like, man, I'm pretty good at this.
I think I stayed exactly where I wanted to be. I felt like I could do the most good for the city of Nashville doing what I was doing. I think making rank is not where I wanted to go. I was where I needed to be, in my opinion. And I made sergeant. I was fortunate enough to stay in the homicide unit for another 11 or 12 years. So I feel like that's where I needed to be, and I felt very comfortable there, and I feel like I was able to do the most good there.
So that was your spot?
I think so.
You feel lucky to have found your niche?
I mean, to me, I think that's right. I think it is like a niche, and I feel like that was my niche. I felt like that was my strength, and I was able to work there. And the longer I stayed there, the more knowledge I got, and the more I learned, and and we're able to do these complex investigations, and I have no regrets of that, staying there whatsoever. That's where I needed to be.
When you leave, is it a clean break, or you try to stay connected? I know you've had a job offer at the DA's office. Do you try to impart all these things you've learned to some of the young people, or is like, I walk away and they're going to have to figure it out? It's not appropriate for me to try to tell them what I learned.
No, I mean, they can. I just got a call 15 minutes ago from somebody asking me a question. I have no problem. They can call me anytime, hopefully not after 9, 10 o'clock at night, but only exception is Don. But anybody else, I'll be glad to help them. If they need something, I'll be glad. If I can help them, if I can make a suggestion or give them a little advice, maybe some things that I've learned from, I'll be happy to do that. So that's not a problem whatsoever.
You hoping that if some of these cases that you would like to solve, if the cold case guys continue to work on them, something comes up, you're hoping they'll say, hey, would you come over? We'd like to pick your brain and tell you what we think you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. If they call me anytime, hopefully they know they can call me, and we'll discuss whatever case they want to talk about.
Are you definitely going to the DA's office? When I did my story, the only thing I could say with certainty, because I hadn't spoken with you, is that you've been offered a job. I got that far. I
would say it's pretty definite.
Okay.
And I'm going to take a little time off, and then I'm going to go over there and try to help them in any way I can.
Okay, investigator, I would assume.
I'm not sure that's what it's going to be called. I think the position's actually evolving, and I think they're discussing it now. But I'm going to be going over there and doing work on homicides. I'll be working specific to homicide.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Anything you wanted to say I didn't think to ask? I never think I have all the questions. Anything that you wanted to let the people know, or the folks of Davidson County, that I haven't thought to ask?
No, I mean, I just want them to know that there's a good cold case unit there, and we're very lucky to have 5 detectives working full-time on cold cases. We have 2 detectives working full-time on missing persons, which, as you know, sometimes become homicides. We're very lucky to have that number of detectives, because typically Memphis, for example, has 1 cold case detective. So it's very difficult to work when you have several hundred unsolved cases. It's very difficult to have 1 detective working the cases. So we've been very lucky and very fortunate to have as many as we have, which is why we've been able to clear as many cases as we've been able to clear, which is, I think, unprecedented probably throughout the country.